You're watching the TNS Makers, a podcast for people who develop, deploy, and manage at-scale software. For more conversations and articles, please visit thenewstack.io. Now on with the show.
Redis provides a competitive edge to any business by delivering open source and enterprise-grade data platforms to power applications that drive real-time experiences at any scale. Developers rely on Redis to build performance, scalability, reliability, and security into their applications.
Hello to you, and welcome to another fantastic TNS Makers podcast with the News Stack. I'm Darryl Taft, news editor of the News Stack, and our goal is to continue to inform you about the hottest developer issues of the day. Today's episode covers databases, and our special guests are Tim Hall, Chief Product Officer at Redis.
Hey, Darryl. How you doing?
Good. Our other guest is Alain Russell, CEO of Black Pepper, a Redis client.
Hey, Darryl. Nice to meet you.
Same here. I'd like to get like a summary of what you guys do. You know, what's Redis offering, and Alain, what is Black Pepper all about?
Yeah, we're a Redis client. I'll let Tim cover what Redis does, but we're an e-com agency. So we're based in New Zealand. We service the New Zealand, Australian market and work with predominantly traditional retailers and help them in their omni-channel journey. So, yeah, we've been around about 20 years, feel quite old in internet years, and team of about 50 at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
But focused 100% on e-commerce. That's essentially our focus.
So, Tim.
And then on the Redis side, yeah, Redis is an in-memory database. We're a memory-first database, which means the data lands there. People are using us for both caching and persistence these days. We have a number of flexible data models. One of the brand promises of Redis is developers can store the data as they're working with it. So as opposed to, say, a SQL database where you might have to turn your data structures into columns and tables, you can actually store the data structures that you're working with directly into Redis. So whether that's a session, a sorted set, a hash, JSON documents, and more, we provide that flexibility. There's 3 modes you can get Redis in. We have an open source piece of software, download it, run on your laptop. Redis Stack is what we're recommending that developers start with today. And then there's Enterprise Edition. It's available as software or in the cloud. And it's the most popular NoSQL database on the planet, 6 years running. And people love it because of its simplicity, the ease at which developers can understand how to take advantage of it. Its scale, it's fast, super fast, and frankly, its reliability. So, yeah, that's Redis in a nutshell.
Mm-hmm. What's the Redis stack? What's in there?
So Redis, so if we parse this down a little bit, so Redis was actually launched about a decade ago as a sort of standalone open source project. And over the years, as we've tried to extend and add additional capabilities to it, those ended up being constructed as sort of add-on modules and other pieces. And, you know, if you go back and you look at the manifesto for Redis, it talks about things like abhorring complexity. And so to fulfill that for a developer, it felt awkward to say, go grab Redis open source. And by the way, if you wanted to do these other things, then you also have to grab this piece, grab that piece, put it all together. So what we did in March of this year, 2022, is we packaged up all of the extended capabilities that we built over the years, along with a companion app called Redis Insight, which is a desktop developer's tool for debugging and understanding how your application is working with Redis. And we packaged it into one easy-to-use bundle called Redis Stack. And so if you're a purist, an open source purist, and you've used Redis for 10 years, I imagine you're probably still using either the open source or you've upgraded to our commercial model. But if you're a developer getting started today, or if you're interested in taking advantage of some of those new capabilities, Stack's your starting point today.
Mm. So most people know Redis as an open source cache. Can you describe how Redis has evolved and where you're seeing Redis applied today? For instance, we got a story from KubeCon about how Redis is not just a cache that can be used as a data projection API. I don't know if you saw that, but it got a lot of interest.
Yeah. About 40% of our customers today are using us as a primary database technology. And that may surprise some people. Again, if you're a sort of classic Redis user and you knew us from in-memory caching, you probably didn't realize we added a variety of mechanisms for persistence over the years. And so, that's the first thing is you can actually set up Redis now to store the data, and it does store it on disk, sort of behind the scenes while keeping a copy in memory. And then so if there's any sort of failures and those sorts of things, we can recover the data off of disk and replay it into memory and get you back up and running. So that's a mechanism that's been around for, I don't know, half a decade now, but it's kind of a long game to convince people of something new sometimes, particularly when, they all have day jobs and are solving other problems. And, Elaine, I don't know how frequently you're reading our blog. I'm sure you're not reading it on a weekly or daily basis. You may have your account team helping you point out the new things that are coming, but so it's a little bit of a long game, Darryl, I have to say, in terms of continuing to reach out to developers and showing them what the latest capabilities are. But one of the things that you see out of the top sort of 10 databases on the planet, right? If you were to go to look at all of them, they've all moved into the multi-model category. And Redis is no different from that perspective. So if you look at Oracle, was traditionally a relational database. Mongo was traditionally a JSON document store only. And obviously Redis is a key value store. We've all moved down the field. Now, why would we do that? We're all looking to simplify the developer's world, right? Why should you have a unique data platform for each type of data that you're working with? It creates a lot of complexity, both for the developer to figure out which ones they're going to connect to, as well as the operator having to install, run, and maintain all those different pieces. And so each vendor is really trying to leverage, what I would say is their core differentiation and expand out from there. And the good news for Redis is speed is our core differentiation. And so why would you want a slow data platform, right? You don't. Mm-hmm. So the more that we can offer those extended capabilities for working with things like JSON, or we just launched a data structure called T-Digest that people can use and we've had support for Bloom filter, which is a probabilistic data structure. Like all of these things, as we kind of expand our footprint, we're saying if you need speed and reducing latency and having high interactivity as your goal, Redis should be your starting point. If you want some esoteric edge case functionality where you need to manipulate JSON in some very strange way, you probably should go with Mongo. Like I probably won't support that for a long time, right? But if you're just working with the basic data structures, you need to be able to query, you need to be able to update your JSON document. Those straightforward use cases we support very, very well, and we support them at speed and scale. So I think
from our perspective too, the speed was certainly our starting point. So we were Redis customers, and I can talk about how, because we've gone through the same transition, right? So we started off as Redis as a cache. It helps us speed up traditional data that was slower than we wanted it. And then we went down a cloud path a couple of years ago. So for us, we've been down a cloud migration. We've moved out of local data centers that we were using and hardware that we owned. And part of that migration included us becoming, what's deemed as cloud native. And we started using all of these different data stores and data structures, and dealing with all of them is actually complicated, and from a developer perspective, it can be a bit painful. So, when we started looking for how to make our world simpler, but also keep it very, very fast, we looked at the Redis stack and honestly, it filled all of our needs in one platform. And we're kind of in this path at the moment where we're using the basics of it, and we're very early on in our journey, right? Like we're not right the way down. We're still learning how things work and how to use it properly. But we also have a big list of things that we're using other data stores for, traditional data, and working out, okay, this will be something that we will migrate to, because we use persistent heavily now in Redis, and we're using persistent data, but we're not using it as our primary data. So the issue we obviously have is, we've got legacy code. Everyone has legacy code that they're dealing with. So we still have that traditional relational data that we need to access from lots of different places, and rewriting that for us isn't feasible to do it in one go. But we can do a chunk at a time, and the chunks that we're doing are the ones we're having performance issues with. And that's working really, really well for us on the journey that we're on.
Okay, thanks. That I think that answered about 2 or 3 of my other questions, but I appreciate it.
Happy to expand on them, though. No problem.
Back to Tim. You mentioned something called T Digest. What is that?
Yeah. So T Digest is it's a technical name for a data structure type for how the data is organized and stored, right? And people use it for a wide variety of reasons. I know at my previous company, we actually used T Digest to compare data on disk in 2 different locations to see whether or not, rather than trying to compare line by line by line, record by record, when you're dealing with millions and billions of data points, potentially, what you want is some sort of summary that gives you a rough sketch of the data that you've got. And T Digest is a type of data structure where you can sketch it out and store that sketch, and then you want to retrieve it and do comparisons. And it's quicker than trying to, retrieve every single data point or summarize every single data point and get a discrete answer, if you will. So, that's the rough description.
I wanted to ask you about how do you manage the open source project versus the commercial offering, and how do you deal with that, and what goes in? Yep. So that's a great question. By the way, this is my 3rd open source company that I've run products for. So previously I was at Hortonworks as part of the Hadoop ecosystem and worked on a lot of different Apache projects in terms of understanding how that worked. And then previously I was head of products at Influx Data, the time series data platform company, and now at Redis. And here's what I can tell you. Not every open source company is the same, right? In terms of how you make decisions about what lands in your commercial offering, what lands in open source, where the contributions come from, who's involved. If I go back to the days of Hortonworks, it was the Apache Software Foundation is a large meritocracy. And so, you're constantly interacting with folks from different organizations and that have different opinions about the direction in which individual components should go. You as a product manager then, or maybe the head of products, is looking at how do those contributions sort of aggregate into the thing that you're trying to put in the market and how you differentiate against others. And that can be a real challenge, frankly. In the Hadoop ecosystem, there were 2 models. Hortonworks was 100% open source. Everything was available. Everything was an Apache Software Foundation project. And then their competitor at the time, and by the way, those companies have merged, was Cloudera. And Cloudera had a closed source model where the bulk of their platform was open source, but then they had some closed source commercial pieces that they built on top. And so that's a way to differentiate. At Influx, every committer, meaning every person that was allowed to write code and commit it to the core platform was an Influx data badged employee. And while we accepted contributions under the MIT license and the contributor license agreement that's associated with the InfluxDB and Telegraph and the other projects that they had, they were all reviewed by other developers, obviously, and we reviewed them for commercial interest. So if there was something that somebody wanted to contribute that was going to go against our commercial interest, we probably would not merge that. Now, they're of course, have the project and apply that commit to their own fork, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we were going to accept it. Now, Redis was run
by Salvatore Sanfilippo for many, many years. And he was the sole arbiter of what landed and what did not land in Redis itself. And what we've done over the last couple of years is we have a core steering committee. It's made up of one individual from AWS, one individual from Alibaba, and 3 Redis employees who look after the contributions that are coming in from our open source community members who want to contribute those things. And then we reconcile what we want from a commercial interest perspective, either upstream or things that, frankly, may have been commoditized and that we want to push downstream into the open source offering. And so the thing that you're asking about is sort of my core and existential challenge all the time, is figuring out where we're going from a commercial perspective. What do we want to land there first? And how can we create a conveyor belt of commercial opportunity that keeps us in business as a software company, creating differentiation against potential competitors that show up, and then over time making sure that those things that do become commoditized or maybe are not as differentiating anymore, I want to release those to the open source community. But it is this upstream downstream kind of challenge is something that we're constantly working through.
Okay. Well, so Elaine, from your perspective, what's the value of a commercial vendor like Redis? What do they provide on top of a popular open source project that you see?
I think for us, like one of the big decisions that we wanted to go through in our cloud journey was we don't want to run anything, right? So that's the benefit: infinite scale, but also managed services. From a Redis perspective, we just have to worry about the development side and accessing our data and dealing with it at that point. What we don't need to do is worry about servers and scaling and sharding and all of the things that we actually don't really want to have anything to do with. The other huge benefits in a world where we need everything to be real time and we need to have answers really quickly is we have a support team with Redis on Slack at the moment. We have conversations with them as we have things that come up. And they essentially can give us answers pretty quick. So, often when we're hitting a roadblock or we don't understand how to do something or we're looking for guidance on the best way to do it, the people that we're dealing with, they are all the people that we deal with anyway, are all ex-Redis users from different companies, So we've got a great technical account manager at the moment at Redis who actually worked at an e-com company doing search and personalization, which for us is a resource that, we've happened across, and it's great that she's around, but it's a perfect resource for us to tap into and say, hey, here's some things that we're trying to understand or what we're trying to do with search or with personalization. Can you help? And that can be, off the record comments, which are really useful for us, or it can be white papers or, links to documentation. And I think that for us is probably one of the main benefits. And the fact that we have a set of databases that we have available, they're just there. We don't have to worry about what goes on with them in the background. So they're essentially fully managed for us.
Okay.
Which I think in a cloud world is exactly the same as us using, managed RDS or managed Dynamo. It's just, we just want to worry about the dev side of what we're doing.
Mm-hmm. So I'm interested in your perspective of Redis as a customer, and how did you decide to use Redis?
Yeah, cool. This one's an easy one. So I think I touched before. So we were a open source Redis customer, right? So we started a journey where we used Memcache to speed up data. We migrated to Redis when we went into AWS Cloud, and we use Elasticache Redis instances. In our world, we abstracted that away in our ecom platform to be basically set a cache value, get a cache value. So we weren't using a lot of the extra data structures that are available. And we essentially, and during COVID, I guess we started running into scaling problems. So we had issues with writing predominantly. So ecom, as a technology that you're trying to run is very, very write heavy. We're dealing with wish lists and people adding to carts and data changing all the time. And we kind of run into problems where you're essentially scaling your databases to handle that write. But it's costing a fortune. And that's the reality, is it costs a lot to scale for writing in the cloud world. So we started looking for different options to handle partly that write scale problem that we had. And we were also running into a problem where we basically, the data structure that we're dealing with in a product world was getting more complex. And the way that our customers wanted to be able to define, how a product shows on the site, where it shows, the data points that we have on it, we're getting more and more complex. And in a kind of relational database world, that was getting very hard for us to get the data out quick enough. So we kind of went down a journey where we looked at all the different options, and we looked at, NoSQL options. We looked at Dynamo. We played around with Elastic. We tried to get MySQL JSON working for us, and they all kind of worked, but they were just as slow as our traditional data that we were playing with. We weren't actually getting the data fast enough. And we're performance obsessed as a team. So our dev team are absolutely performance obsessed about trying to get the data out of our back end. We set ourselves a target of being able to get something back in under 100 milliseconds. So we're basically trying to get data out as fast as we can. And the beauty we had when we started testing Redis was we have some great, I'll cover some real world examples. We live in a world where everything's measured in 100 milliseconds now. And that's, I don't understand the physics behind it, but it's crazy, crazy fast. So we see data that we traditionally would take, 5-10 seconds to generate in a relational SQL query. And we get that information now in a millisecond. And that's just purely based around the complexity and trying to deal with, how customers are trying to find information and link that data up. So this is all back-end process that we had running, and for us, it's how we categorize sites and how things show. And that has all essentially become real time. And the benefit for us in that is we're starting to now change all of our UI because we can show that data and we can show feedback to a customer as they're basically typing. So as a customer is creating, collections or products or categories in a site, they can be adding search criteria, and we can essentially tell them in real time what that's going to look like. Whereas in a traditional world, you would do it, you would save it, we'd queue something up, and we'd know eventually in a few seconds what it was going to look like, but that may be too late. So it's given us a real different kind of approach now in how we're looking at everything, because we can say, actually, we can give you that in real time, and we can do it instantly in feedback in the UI as you're playing around with different options. And I think that's where we ended up, is it was the only thing that could give us the data as fast as we wanted.
Mm-hmm. So was there any impact on the legacy systems, and have you moved on from those?
Yeah, I think what I was saying, so we still have legacy code that we're dealing with. The transition for us is we're starting on our journey. We're starting to now use, hashes and sorted sets, and TGIS actually sounds really interesting. We already have a use case for it, probably, that we were trying to solve the other day. So we are starting to use all the different things. What we're basically doing with it is trying to move parts of our logic across. So if you think about a product data set on a site, so we may have a site that has 20,000 products. It's easy enough for us to move that into Redis and start using, and we use Redis JSON for that. Mm. So we use JSON and indexing. So we can move all of that into Redis and start changing parts of our front end and back end stack to reference that data directly. What we can't do is get rid of the legacy data store, because we still have, another 60-70% of our stack that is expecting that data to be in a traditional SQL database. So we're basically working on a kind of two different ways of accessing the data, but anything that is a performance issue for us or is new is now starting to access, the JSON directly. And yeah, it makes life pretty simple for us moving forward, because we handle the writing into two places as the data we ingest it. And then we know that everything is in one place. And it's powering our search now.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of our search is using Redis, and we're building some tuning tools for customers that will basically allow them to run different options and things. But yeah, that data structure for us is available. We use it for all of our shopping cart tech now. So essentially Redis is handling all of our shopping carts, and that is the only store of that. So we're persistently writing that, and it's the only place that we have it currently.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned JSON. I wanted to get into that a bit. For Tim, why is Redis a fit for search and JSON use cases? They're purpose-built search engines and JSON databases. How does Redis approach these markets?
Yeah, well, I think Alain said it best. If performance and eliminating latency is the name of the game, then you should probably look at Redis as the starting point for that. Yes, there are lots of search tech and other tech that's out there, and there certainly are use cases, right, where you may want to use those. But if reducing that latency, it's like, and Alain, you can tell me where I get off the track here, but like when you have an e-commerce use case, you want that user engaged with the experience in real time, because anytime that it starts to slow down, what do you think they're going to do? They're going to bail and go somewhere else, right? So that interactivity is the thing that keeps them engaged. 100%. And whether it's type ahead, whether it's recommendations being generated based on what they've typed, whether it's other types of suggestions and things that you can do, it's that interactivity that keeps the user engaged, right? And so we feel like, again, if you're working with JSON as a data structure, the challenge with that is you could reference the document itself, right, as a particular key. And so, previously what people were doing with Redis is developers were like, well, I need the speed of JSON, but since Redis did not support JSON documents until relatively recently, they would convert them into strings, stuff them into Redis, and then pull them back out, reconvert them back to JSON, and then do the work on top of them. And I cringe at even telling that story, because frankly, it doesn't fulfill the brand promise of Redis, which is I want the developer to be able to work with that document, without those string conversions back and forth. And so we added that capability. The challenge is that now, because it's a document, right, and it has a structure to it, there may be nodes in that document that you want to index and that you would like to create a query experience on top of, right? You may want to string pieces of data together. We've got some customers who are storing, they're using it almost as a data fabric. I know this is going to sound very strange, or a data mesh, where they've grown through acquisition, and they're like, how am I going to present a single unified interface to my end customer? And they may be customer of all of these different acquisitions that we've now pulled together. I can't rewrite those systems quickly. What I can do is give them a presentation layer that will take advantage of the fact that their data resides in all these other systems, but publish it into Redis as a JSON data structure, make the customer identifier, either common or key across them. And then when that customer shows up, pull all that data for them and present it to them quickly. Leave those existing systems in place, just as Alain was saying. Like, you're going to have to. There's other things that rely on that data. But what you can do is you can evolve to provide them with an experience that is interactive, provides them access to their data, and keeps them engaged with you. And so I think both the query capability that we added on top of Redis, so it's not just key value anymore, this idea of secondary indexing on top of either hashes or JSON documents is super powerful for people to take advantage of, to obtain that real-time speed and reduce latency. So to me, I think it's a huge win, and getting folks like Alain and the Black Pepper team to talk more about it and how it's worked for them is part of some awareness that we need to continue to do to show people they can be successful with that, and that we love caching and we're caching and beyond.
I think actually just to add to that, so for us, one of the big things about JSON is we can write JSON, right? So we write JSON directly to Redis. What we find really, really powerful is the fact that we can change indexes and change our full text searching on the fly. We can add an index, and again, I don't understand the physics behind it, but it's instant. So we can add an index, it's there instantly, and we can query it, and it doesn't seem to be affected by the size of the JSON we're storing or how many objects we're storing there. So it gives our development team a really quick way to test things and try to get things working without having to re-index and restore data and work through, okay, now we have to send that JSON differently because we want to do something different with it. The beauty about the way that Redis full text works is we essentially can change those indexes and change those queries, and it's the same data in the background. We've stored it once, we don't have to do anything more with it. And we're just touching the surface of it, but yeah, the power that we get from that and the ability to try things quickly is making a huge difference for us.
Yeah, and that's a really different experience than other sort of purpose-built full-text search engines, where they're not tuned to the developer experience. They're tuned to I'm dealing with hundreds of pages of PDFs and other kinds of documents. Right? It's not. They were built to solve a different kind of problem, and I would say Redis is well suited to the kinds of problems Alain and his team are trying to solve, which is it's a win. But there still is a horses for courses kind of argument to be made. Like, I'm not saying you should replace every possible full text search use case with Redis. I that would be both naive and a huge overreach. But in the kinds of environments and the kinds of use cases, I think that Alain and team are finding themselves in, it seems like a great fit.
For Tim, can you give some examples of where you see the greatest interest in Redis for search, and how strategic is Redis search?
So our query and searching capabilities are actually fundamental to where we're going. I think it's a super powerful engine. I think the explanation stands on its own. I think the things I need to do for Alain and team is to make it simpler. So we know that people are having to do right behind use cases, but he's having to do that pretty much on his own, I'm assuming, today. And so we're going to introduce a set of data integration capabilities to support right behind, so that you can keep Redis in front, but because you have to keep some of those other legacy systems alive, or there's lower latency or slower use cases that you need to support that you may not need the data in Redis, I want to provide a separate persistence mechanism to allow you to write behind to Mongo or whomever else you want to have behind the scenes, or
that'd be cool.
MySQL, etc. So we'll make sure to brief you on that. We're also looking at the reverse, which is a lot of those systems today also support what's called change data capture. And change data capture is essentially a log of what updates are hitting the data, the underlying database. We want to be able to take the change data capture log and turn it into Redis data structures that you could access the other way. And so that's all part of our sort of data integration set of capabilities that we're working on now. The plan is to get to public preview of some of those capabilities early in 2023. And so stay tuned to see where we're going. But I mean, what you're getting at is, JSON being a first-class data structure, a query capability being a first-class engine that works in real-time and speed. And now what else can we do to extend that into the future as we're looking at supporting exactly the kinds of environments that Alain and the team are running into. Make it easier for them to deploy with less technology.
We're almost at time, and I haven't even gotten to half of my questions. So can we do a lightning round of sorts?
Yeah.
Sure.
One thing for Tim, what does the acquisition of resp.app, or however you pronounce it, bring to Redis?
Yep. Yeah. So this is our second acquisition of developer tools, and we are eager to consolidate what's gone on in the sort of developer and open source ecosystem related to assistive tools for debugging and understanding how applications are working with Redis. We actually acquired the assets related to RDB tools, We're building Redis Insights and now REST app. Not only the assets, but the core developer behind it's joined our team. And what we're trying to do is drive a single consolidated developer experience as a companion app to your IDE that helps you understand what's going on inside of Redis as you build your apps. And we're super pumped about that acquisition and what it brings to us, not only from an entrepreneur that was sort of living in the space and trying to drive the best developer experience, but we want that experience to be free and available to all developers so that they can feel powerful when they build solutions on top of the platform.
Mm-hmm. Who are some of your key competitors, and how does Redis measure up against them?
I'd say that the biggest thing from my perspective is folks that are taking our open source and deploying it as a managed service within their environments. So, and the biggest one that I can think of just comes to mind would be AWS. Mm-hmm. And I think the thing that hurts me a little bit is that there's a lot of confusion out there about AWS services not being Redis, right? So people say, oh, I'm using Redis. And it's like, well, what are you using? And they say, I'm using Elasticcache. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, well, that's effectively their fork of Redis open source. But when you look at the investments we've made to build up from open source to Redis Enterprise as our commercial offering, there's a lot of stuff they don't do. But that equation, right, where people are saying this equals that, is a challenge for us because it's not the same. And we're finding customers, certainly as they go on their journey from the beginning of, hey, I'm in AWS, so I might as well just check all the boxes and use all their services because it looks like X, Y, and Z, but it's a lot of assembly required. It's kind of the Christmas Day scenario. You open the box and you spend the rest of the day assembling all the parts. The challenge is as they scale, you may not get the best operational experience. And I think to Alain's point, like good luck when you contact them for support about what's going on. They have no clue about the innards and you know, when you come with us and you use Redis Enterprise, you're going to get the best of what we have to offer for companies that are deploying, and you're going to get the best support experience. I can tell you our support team's amazing. They're still teaching me things about the product, frankly. And they're second to none in terms of supporting our customers and making sure that those questions get answered and our customers can be successful.
Mm-hmm. Just a couple more. What is Redis doing about adding AI ML to the platform?
Oh, I'm glad you asked that. It's a very interesting question. So there's a couple of capabilities that we started adding. The first is we've been communicating about a core use case, which may not surprise you, about online feature store. So an online feature store effectively for ML models means you have fast access to the underlying data that you're trying to model against. It's a caching use case, effectively. So that's in our sweet spot, right? And then what we've been seeing also is that people are starting to use more and more sort of semi-structured data as part of their machine learning models. And so one of the capabilities that we're adding to our search engine is vector similarity search. And so what does that mean? It sounds like a bunch of techno mumbo jumbo, but essentially you can take images and you can turn them into vectors, which is a sort of stream of numbers. And then you can use math to compare those vectors to each other. And so you can do things like, hey, I have a red shirt, a blue shirt, and a green shirt. And when somebody wants to come in and say, well, I want to look at shirts of, different sizes and shapes and things, the vectors will actually give them information that can be searched upon that can allow them to pull those images back and present them extraordinarily quickly. And so that's a capability that we're adding to support, again, folks that are doing recommendation engines, machine learning activities, and AI extensions. And so, so those are two of the things. And then our team is also looking at kind of what's going on with the AI and ML pipelines and where we might show up and integrate more naturally with folks. And I think we're finding some areas where there's certain data structures we don't currently support, but we might want to make that easier. But I can tell you, for sure, We've had a couple of folks recently, iFood, down in South America, was talking about their success with the online feature store capabilities of Redis. And we're going to look to continue to extend in that direction.
One last quick one I want to sneak in is what can we expect to see from Redis in the next year? And for Alain, what are some of the things you'd like to see?
Yeah, I can probably start, actually. It's, I guess the thing for us is Redis, they're iterating faster than we can adopt at the moment. So that's the only thing that we can ask for. So we don't want to ever be in a position where we're waiting for things we would find useful. So currently the rate that new functionality is coming out is faster than we can make use of it, which is a great position to be in for us. I've actually got papers on all the vector similarity stuff because, for ecom, these products look like those products is a really interesting use case for personalization and search. So, we've certainly got a lot on our roadmap that we're going to be taking a look at next year. But yeah, all we can ask for is that functionality is arriving faster than we can use it.
I'm going to make sure the engineers hear that because they love to.
Yeah.
So there's four key things Darryl and I'm working with my team on. One is we want to continue to activate features and capabilities in the cloud as quickly as possible. And there are some gaps there today where we have features available in software that you can't currently consume in our cloud service. And I'd like to eliminate those gaps, if you will, right? There's definitely people taking advantage of those capabilities in software. And just like Alain was saying, is that they're like, okay, well, maybe I've reached the point where I don't want to manage this anymore. I want to focus on the dev side. Cloud has reached a level of maturity where I just want to consume it as a service. And then they're like, I can't move yet because you guys haven't activated this feature. So I'd say that's a key for me. The second thing from a developer experience perspective, and particularly around programmability, is we're going to introduce triggered functions that are based on a JavaScript engine. And when I do that, I want to have that available both in software and again in cloud. And the triggers can be three things. We're going to start with event-based triggers. So when a particular key is accessed or something happens to that, you can trigger an action to take place. I want you to be able to invoke those functions server-side through a named reference, let's say. And then the last one is scheduled. I'd like you to be able to schedule a triggered function to take place. And we'll start with events, and we're going to start with direct invocation, and then the scheduled piece will come later. But I have a bunch of people who today are saying, listen, I've got this JSON data structure, let's say, and I want to take an action when an update actually occurs. But in order for me to do that today, I have to drag all the data out of Redis into my client application, make the manipulations, and then send it all back. And they're like, I don't need to do that. And so that's one of the areas from a developer experience perspective that I want to land again in software and in cloud. You'll see the advancement of Redis Insight in that developer experience to take the lessons that we've gained by having the REST.app team join us and what they've done. So you'll see the companion tools advance. Data integration we talked about, both the CDC capability and the right behind and right through. And then last but not least, you'll see us accelerate on Redis Enterprise. So Redis Open Source 7 has been out for a while, but frankly, there hasn't been any major compelling feature for us to add to Redis Enterprise 7.0. And so that opens up a little bit of a head scratcher where people are like, well, where's the 7.0 version? I'm glad that at least Alain and team are happy with the pace of innovation. Where I'm looking ahead is what can we add to Redis Enterprise 7.2 that people need, want, and desire. That's a compelling step forward, and then we'll pull those Redis 7 open source capabilities forward as well. So I would say in the new year, those are the four areas. It's advancement on Redis Enterprise, the data integration capabilities, our programmability and developer experience advancements, and then making sure that you can do everything in cloud that you can do in software. That's about as lightning as I can make it, Darryl.
That's good, man. I love it. I really appreciate you taking the time. And I want to thank the audience, the listeners, for taking the time to listen to another dynamic conversation with the New Stack.
If you like this video, please give us a thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more videos like this, you can always subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're on all the major social media platforms. You can always find us at thenewstack.io. We hope to see you soon.